Welcome to the Princh Library Lounge. I'm your host, Vicky Walbarn, and I'm joining you from the Princh headquarters in Aarhus, Denmark. Here on the Princh Library Lounge, we have insightful conversations with library professionals from around the world, where they will share their thoughts on topics that are important and impactful to the library community. We hope you enjoy the episode, so let's get to it. The Princh Library Lounge is brought to you by Princh, the preferred printing solution in Scandinavia. Princh is a user-friendly printing solution made for libraries with libraries. Check out princh.com for more details.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for episode 6 of the Princh Library Lounge. I'm your host, Marc Lapointe. Before we begin, a big thank you to all our library listeners who have reached out to say they've listened to the podcast with coworkers on break. It's really awesome to hear. As for today, we'll be discussing libraries and fitness with our guests Noah Lenstra and Jennifer Carson. But before we get into our discussion, let's get to know our guests a bit better. Noah, can we start with you?
Sure. So I am an assistant professor in the Department of Library and Information Science at the University of North Carolina in the USA, in the city of Greensboro. And in 2016, I founded an initiative called Let's Move in Libraries.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Jen, what about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Jenn Carson. I'm a library director in Woodstock, New Brunswick, Canada. And I am a physical literacy researcher and author. I've written a number of books and articles on the subject of physical literacy, which I guess we'll talk about more later, and just getting people moving more in libraries. And Noah and I have worked together. Noah contacted me a number of years ago because he had seen the work that I was doing. I write a blog post for programminglibrarian.org about kinetics and using movement programs in libraries, and he reached out and was interested in what I was working on and told me what he was starting, and we've been working together ever since on different projects, even though we're thousands of miles apart, which is amazing with technology.
Yeah, it is amazing. We've worked together a lot since 2016, but we've never actually met in person. So another great example of kind of how technology is facilitating new forms of connections and collaborations across space among librarians and library professionals.
Definitely. And thank you both for your introductions. Now to switch gears and discuss our topic at hand, libraries and fitness. I think this is a great topic to discuss because libraries and fitness tend not to be brought up together, but perhaps they should be. So with that, my first question is, how can libraries help with educating and getting people more involved in fitness?
Sure, I'll jump in here. So I started doing movement-based programs in libraries over a decade ago. I'm also a yoga instructor. I started out with a diploma teaching children yoga, and then I also went back and studied how to teach adults yoga. And so my library director at the time, this was before I had gotten my master's degree, was really open to sort of different programming ideas. And I've always been kind of like, let's try this out and see what happens. And so I asked her if I could start offering yoga programs for kids at our library. This was at the Kennebecasis Public Library in New Brunswick in Quispeam-Sis. And it was going really well. In fact, it was so popular. People were asking me to teach yoga programs outside of the library and other places. And I was really connecting with kids that were on the spectrum and their parents, or kids with behavioral problems, because a lot of them had difficulty communicating verbally, but they really could connect well physically, and the physicality of the program, as opposed to like trying to sit through a story time where they would be fidgeting a lot, or having a hard time staying on task, even doing a craft or an activity. The physicality of the yoga and the movement sort of stuff and the songs and the games we were doing, because of course I still tied in literacy and we were still learning things and working with our voices and words at the same time, that really sort of tied it all together for them. And that's what sparked my interest in physical literacy. And I actually trained to be an autism support worker and started working in intervention in the schools. And I just started doing more and more research. And then I realized that there just wasn't much research being done on how libraries could use kinetics to teach patrons. And so when I was doing my master's degree, Denise Augusto was my project supervisor, and I asked her if I could study physical literacy in libraries. And that's when I discovered there was no research on physical literacy in libraries. NOAA has been working very hard the last 3 years to change that. But there was literally nothing. It was a blank slate. And so that's when I created yogainthelibrary.com, which is basically a resource. It's a number of years old now because I graduated in 2015. A resource for librarians to find out about yoga and meditation programs, which were my specialty. I mean, I can't talk so much about teaching, like basketball, but I know a lot about yoga and meditation. So I created a website for librarians to find books and videos and handouts that they could use. And that's where it all kind of started for me. And Noah, do you want to jump in?
What I've really found is that it is people like Jenn Carson who are really helping libraries get more involved with fitness. It's people that in their personal lives are really passionate about fitness, about physical activity, about physical literacy, and that passion is spilling over into their practice as a public librarian. And so I think one of the things that we can do to kind of support this trend is to really make it a priority at the national and even international level. And indeed, that was one of the things that led to me founding Let's Move in Libraries, because in the year 2016, that was the year of the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. And because it was the year of the Summer Olympics, a national organization here in the US called the Collaborative Summer Library Program, or CSLP, which provides kind of guidance on summer programming in public libraries. They focused all of their programming advice in 2016 around exercise and physical activity. And so, for instance, the theme for the youth programming was on your mark, get set, read. For teenagers, it was get in the game. And for adults, it was exercise your mind. And so there's different themes every year, but there was just such an enormous explosion of kind of physical activity programs in 2016 with that prompt. And so, for instance, the Lawrence Public Library in Lawrence, Kansas, they did fitness on the lawn every Friday. So every Friday throughout the summer, they introduced their patrons to different forms of physical activity, everything from capoeira to CrossFit, and all sorts of other things. And so what 2016, that summer, really showed is that with a little bit of prompting, with a little bit of support, librarians are really ready to pick up the ball and run with it. But it has to be part of the conversation. It has to be part of the culture. If we continue to bandy about ridiculous notions like libraries are only spaces to exercise your mind, nothing's going to happen. So I think it does have to be a culture shift, and it has to really start with librarians themselves being willing to talk about the importance of physical activity and embracing physical activity and fitness as part of their identities as librarians in the way that Jenn Carson has.
Yes, definitely. I think you both brought up some great points there. I mean, two things is it is physical literacy is a type of literacy, so that needs to be part of the conversation, as Noah mentioned, and a lot of times it's just starting the conversation that libraries are spaces and have resources that physical literacy or physical fitness can be achieved there. So I'm glad we can kind of have that conversation and hopefully spread some more awareness. And then moving into my next question is, what recommendations do you have for libraries or library professionals that want to take actionable steps to make sure fitness is a focus at their library?
So I've written a lot about this in my books because it's really important to get administration's buy-in and staff buy-in. You're not going to get anywhere if you're just a really gung-ho librarian who wants to start offering, let's say, dance classes in your libraries, but your staff, your board, and your higher ups want no part of it. So the most important thing is to educate yourself about physical literacy and how important it is. Educate yourself about what's happening, like statistics on obesity, statistics on how, this generation is projected to be have shorter lifespans and to not be as healthy as their parents because of our sedentary natures. Educate yourself on all that stuff, and then go in to have a conversation with your administration, sort of armed with the facts and examples. And Noah has tons of these on the Let's Move In Libraries website, of tons and tons of examples of other libraries doing movement-based programs. Because if you go in and they think it's sort of an anomaly, they're going to be less likely to want to jump on the non-existent bandwagon. But once you show them there actually is a whole, pardon the pun, movement happening, and then they'll see, like, oh, it's not just a one-off crazy idea from this sort of obsessive librarian who's really into CrossFit or whatever, but it's like it's an actual thing and there's research behind it. And that's what Noah and I have worked so hard the last 6 years or 3 years together, is making sure that there are metrics and measurable outcomes for having these sorts of programs. So once you get administrative buy-in and staff buy-in, if you can write it into policy and strategic plans, even better. Like, I've just been working really hard with the New Brunswick Public Library system to include it in our strategic plan. It's getting there. Right now, we have it in the work plans of every frontline staff that they need in their libraries. They need to offer at least one movement-based program per year. And that doesn't mean just adding like a little like dance routine or a stretch to a story time. It means an actual movement-based program. And we don't have to be the ones offering that. So that's a thing that I think a lot of people get hung up on, is they think, oh my goodness, I'm not a fitness instructor, or I'm sort of out of shape, or I don't even like sports. How am I supposed to offer these programs at my libraries? This is not what I signed up for when I went to library school. You don't have to. There's so many people in our communities that love sports and love moving their bodies, and they're more than happy to share their skills. So we offer, like, just for example, at my library, multiple dance programs. We have swing dance and belly dance and ballroom dance and set dancing, all different kinds of dance programs. I don't teach any of them. I've participated in some of them and been a stand-in instructor's helper when I needed to, but I don't actually teach them because I don't know anything about teaching dance, and neither do my staff. So we either hire or have volunteers come in from the community, and these are people who love dancing and they're happy to share their skills. So I think making sure that library staff and administrators are aware that this can be, a great sharing opportunity between volunteers and community members as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenn. And once again, I'm just in absolute total agreement. And I'll just highlight three things that Jenn said that I think is so important. The first is I agree that making it part of the culture is so important. And I think a really good way to start is by focusing on how we support workplace wellness, and how we ensure that our libraries are environments where library staff have the resources to be healthy. Because I've seen so many examples of workplace wellness initiatives become kind of public programs. And I'll just share one example really quickly that I really love. So in rural southeast Ohio, there's something that the Athens County Public Library is located. And in 2012, the library wanted to do something to support wellness among staff. And so they came up with the idea, well, a lot of greenways are popping up in our county. There was lots of kind of rails to trails initiatives with old railroads becoming trails. And they said, well, why don't we start checking out bicycles that our staff can use? And that would be a way to support staff wellness, making bicycles available. And after they got it off the ground, they said, why should we just have the bikes only available for staff? We could also make these available for patrons. And so they did. And it's been hugely successful. And the idea of libraries checking out bicycles has since spread throughout the country and beyond. And there's a great book chapter on the process they went through to develop that. And similarly, closer to me in High Point, North Carolina, the library became the venue for the local communities focus on, they needed a venue to offer exercise classes for municipal employees, so employees of the city. And so the library said, hey, we have meeting rooms that are not being used during the day, out during the school year. Why don't you come and do your workplace wellness classes for city employees at the library? And then after those classes started and librarians started to participate in them, they said, wow, this is really going well. Why don't we just make these programs open to the public? We don't need to restrict them just to city employees. And so they did. And now they do exercise classes for the public every Monday and Friday. So I think starting with workplace wellness, starting with supporting library staff is a really great way to get this off the ground and to really make it part of the culture. And I totally agree about sharing best practices. And that's one thing that I've tried to do with Let's Move in Libraries, with kind of the advisory board structure. Just last month in September, 2 of our advisory board members did presentations on physical fitness and physical literacy in libraries at the Maine Library Association in the U.S. state of Maine, as well as at the Minnesota Library Association. So empowering and providing structure for librarians to feel comfortable talking about this topic is also really important. And Jenn, I so agree with the importance of partnerships. And one partnership that Jenn does at her library that she hasn't mentioned, but I love, is there's a local running club in Jenn's town of Woodstock, New Brunswick. And Jenn said, hey, guys and gals, why don't you come and just have your running club meet at the library? You can start your runs here. And so it's a pretty low, it didn't take much to get that partnership off the ground. I imagine just say, hey, instead of meeting, I don't know, wherever they were meeting before, a cafe, why not just invite the local running club to meet at the library and have that be their launch off point. And so, yeah, just being open and to forming those partnerships. So it's not just something new that you have to do, but it's just making sure that people are aware that the library wants to be a resource and an ally in efforts to support physical fitness and physical literacy.
Yeah, and I'm going to take this opportunity to plug something that's coming up. It'll be already done by the time this podcast airs, but I'm sure you'll be able to find a recording of it. On Thursday of this week, I'm actually the keynote speaker at the Healthy Habits, Cultivating Health and Wellness in Libraries and Communities conference, which is put on by the Amigos Library Services in Texas. And it's free. It's a free online conference. So it's October 10th, but I'm sure they'll do a recording of the sessions and you'll be able to listen to it. But my keynote talk is going to be called Taking Care of Us, Ergonomic Advice for Library Staff. And it's a whole hour dedicated to how you can take care of your staff and take care of yourself at work and different ways to include wellness in the workplace based on real world evidence of things that I've done and other libraries have done that actually work. And I have a similar presentation that I did for the American Library Association that's up for free on my website, jenncarson.com. Because like Noah said, it's so important to get staff buy-in by having them experience the programs themselves. I send all of my frontline staff, if they want to something we have in New Brunswick called superhero training. And it teaches the fundamentals of physical literacy, the building blocks for healthy movement. And so they get to actually do the games and everything themselves to learn those fundamental movement skills or relearn them. And think about, the way you hold a ball properly and the way you hold a bat and the way you take steps and how you walk differently on sand versus ice or grass or other things, and get them thinking in that kind of mindset and how important it is. And then they start feeling really good in their bodies and they start being more aware of how they're moving their own bodies and how they're sitting at their desks and how they're using their workstations. And when people feel good in their own bodies and they feel empowered, they want to share that with other people and they want other people to feel good. So when you feel good, you want to go out and do good in your community. And so I think it's really important to get staff onto the whole plan so they see that it's not just a fad. It's not just like, oh yeah, here's another thing on our to-do list we've got to do. Oh, now we have to do this. It's like they want to because it's so much fun.
That leads me to my next question. What role does the library have in promoting and educating the community about overall fitness?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this real quick, and then I know that Noah has all kinds of exciting stuff to talk about with this. But from my perspective, because Noah sort of works in the research academic side at the university, and I work front lines. And so I see so many people in our community, and we're a fairly affluent little township. But we have like a large homeless population for our size. We're only about 6,000 people, a little bit less. We have a fair number of low income families as well, people that are food insecure, home insecure. These are not necessarily demographics of people that can afford gym memberships or have places to go during the day or have opportunities to be taught or learn healthy habits or ways to take care of their bodies. And physical literacy isn't just doing sports, right? It's also learning to be able to tell interoceptively what's going on with your body. When am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I sleepy? Do I feel lethargic? Maybe I shouldn't have a bunch of caffeine right now. Maybe what I really need is a sandwich. Being able to learn those body cues as well and be able to help yourself when you need those sorts of things. So I absolutely believe that it is the mandate of public libraries, especially, to be able to provide those sorts of services and information to our patrons because they can't access it elsewhere. There's not many other places in our communities where people can get these sorts of programs for free. I mean, even just thinking about yoga, most yoga studios, and this is part of their prerogative, right? They're a business; they have to stay in business. And no, there's very few rich yoga teachers in the world. So my yoga people, I hear you. But they have to charge $15 or $20 for a drop-in session to keep the lights on. A lot of people don't have $15 or $20 in their pocket that they can dedicate to going to a yoga class every week. So I teach yoga for free here at the library, and everyone can come. And the other thing is that it's a barrier-free sort of area. People might feel really intimidated going to a gym or joining a softball league or going to a yoga studio, but almost everyone feels comfortable coming into a library because everyone's welcome here. And so it takes out that intimidation factor as well of like, there's no scary gym equipment they have to learn how to use. And there's no like coach with a whistle. It's a really sort of chill, easygoing sort of environment, and people can just come in and try it out. And there's also no commitment. They can come to a class. If they don't like it, they haven't lost anything. They haven't spent any money, and they never have to come back, and we're not going to judge them for it. It's no big deal. And so there's a like mental perception as well that libraries are like safe, welcoming spaces. And so I think if we can offer this, some people can't. You have a small 1 or 2 person library. Maybe you don't have a lot of space in your library. You don't have any outdoor areas. I understand. I'm not saying every library in the entire world needs to offer movement-based programming, but if you can and you have the resources and the enthusiasm to do it, why not? It's such a wonderful thing to offer our community, and it targets people that wouldn't necessarily have access to that sort of education otherwise, and it brings them in to the library, and then suddenly they're open to all the other programs we have. Maybe they came in for your yoga class, but now they're getting help writing a resume on the computer, and they're checking out books to learn how to take their GED, which is their high school equivalency here in Canada, so they can get a better job and support their families. And it's not pie in the sky. This is like real things that have happened. We have a coloring program here at our library, and I consider coloring physical literacy. It's fine motor skills, and it's an open program that people can just come in. Anybody can come. We put out the coloring books, and adults come during the day and they color. And I had one patron say to me, that he didn't leave his house for like 3 months. He was so depressed. And now he comes every week to our coloring group, and he's made a whole group of friends, and they all go out and get like coffee and snacks afterwards together at the cafe, get a muffin. And he has like this whole community just because he came and started coloring. He didn't even care that much about coloring, but somebody like got him out of the house and said, you really need to come. This is a great group. And so it's the community aspect as well that people, they find, enjoyment in doing things together, even if it's suffering through, the embarrassment of trying to do down dog when you've never done it before and everybody has a laugh at themselves. It's that ability to just get out of your house and find that sort of living room of the community, that community space where you can be with other people in a sort of non-judging atmosphere. Okay, Noah, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And yeah, I would totally agree. And I'll just add a few things from kind of the research side. So I've been working a lot with people in the fields of public health and parks and recreation management. And really within that sector, there's been a trend going on for over a decade now to try to get more institutions to support fitness, because we know that it's not just something that Gold's Gym is going to be able to do on their own. And so I'll just read this quote from the American Public Health Association in their most recent newsletter. So they just published a new book called Physical Activity in Public Health. And they say that forming partnerships and collaborations with other organizations is important to sustain community health programs. We talk about how to get people to the table and create sustainable coalitions. It takes more than a village to do this, that is, and what the World Health Organization calls a pandemic of physical inactivity, which is seen as comparable to efforts to end smoking and increase healthy eating. So this is one of the major, if not the major, public health issues of our modern moment. Here in the U.S., there was a new report on the state of obesity in America. In pretty much every state, obesity levels have risen and have continued to rise over the last 50 years, pretty much everywhere across the country. So this is so if we think that libraries have a role to play in supporting health, it seems to me that implies that libraries have a role to play in supporting fitness, because fitness is one of the cornerstones of kind of preventative health. And so, for me, I really think it is about partnerships. It's not about the role is really libraries have a responsibility to address and respond to things that are happening in the community. And this is one thing that's happening in pretty much every community. I mean, I honestly think if Americans and people around the world were getting enough physical activity, there would be no role for libraries. But the reality is they're not, and there is. And so that's kind of my 2 cents. But I think that there's absolutely a role to be played, and I think it's just similarly if Americans and people around the world were getting adequate instruction in science, technology, engineering, and math in the public school system, we wouldn't have to do STEM programming. But the reality is there isn't, and therefore there's a role for libraries. I think it's exactly the same.
I think you both brought up some great points. The barrier-free access libraries can provide for physical literacy or any form of literacy is an important aspect to highlight. But moving on from this, I know you both have already provided some examples, but is there any other initiatives you would like to highlight in regard to libraries and fitness?
Yeah, so Noah had mentioned the thing about borrowing bikes from libraries. What a great program. And so I'd like to really highlight that there's all kinds of ways that libraries can sort of passively offer these programs. Again, passive, sort of tongue in cheek here. But that we don't necessarily have to be teaching classes on things, but we can be providing services in the form of materials for loan. So libraries are lending out bikes and snowshoes and skis and all kinds of sporting equipment. They have fitness bags you can borrow that maybe has like a set of golf clubs, or maybe has a frisbee and different frisbee games in it, or parachutes and things like that. Here at our library, we just started this year a kite lending program. So we have a local kite maker who makes these beautiful organic kites, cotton kites, and he donated 6 of them to our library. And so families can come and borrow a kite, and they come with a map of our area and all the cool places to fly kites, and then instructions about how to put the kites together and how to look after them properly. And people for free can borrow these kites at the library and take them out and play with them for 3 weeks and then bring them back at no charge. And these kites, because they're so well made and they're so beautiful, they're about $90 to $100 to buy. So for many people in our community, that's just not feasible. But they're able to come and try them out to see if they may want to buy one, or to just have one to use for 3 weeks, take it camping with them. And so that's a way that a library can offer a movement-based program without actually offering the movement-based program. We're putting it on the people to do it themselves, but we're providing the equipment that may be a barrier for some people to actually go out and purchase themselves. And in a similar way, there's ways of involving community partners to encourage physical activity. But again, you don't have to instruct anything. So this year for our summer reading club, usually we have a big launch party, and then at the end we have a closing party. And so what I did this year is I partnered with a local water park. And what we did is we had our launch party at the water park. And so all the kids and families met us there, and I got free passes for everybody to the water park. And this was generously donated by Jellystone Park here in Woodstock. And the kids got free admission for a few hours to go on the water slides and play games and, do all kinds of really fun stuff, play on the playground equipment with their families. And a lot of the people that came, again, were people that wouldn't necessarily have had the ability to buy a family pass to the park. Or maybe they were newcomers to our community and they'd never been to a water slide before. We have a lot of immigrant families in our community, like Syrian and Hungarian, lots of different places where they don't necessarily have water slides. And what I did is I brought a bunch of translators from our Multicultural Association and had them there so they could translate. We had like 6 or 7 different languages going on at the same time to explain to our families what the procedure was, what they could wear and not wear on the water slides and all this sort of stuff. It was a really kind of interesting multicultural experience to have all these families coming together and doing this, and then signing up for a summer reading club at the same time, and talking about stories and keeping up their reading during the summer. And then at the end of the summer, I should say, we had a closing party. And what we did is for if the kids met their reading goals for the summer, they got a free pass to go to the park to go to the mini golf, and they got to go and try out mini golf for free. And so I didn't have to do anything other than organize all this, but I didn't have to construct a water slide or teach kids how to swim or do anything like that. It was just part of the process. So thinking outside the box of ways that you can involve businesses and other volunteer organizations like the Multicultural Association in your town to be able to partner with these sorts of programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are amazing examples. And certainly I agree with kind of partnerships and also embracing how library of things can be used to support fitness. And I'll just add really quickly, one of the major things that I've been working on is how libraries can support healthy aging. And so I think a lot of the discussion has focused on children and young people. And I think that's fine. But I've actually found in my research that some of the most impactful programs are actually focused on older adults, which are a growing sector of the population throughout North America and beyond. And so I've been working with the National Institute on Aging, as well as the National Recreation and Parks Association, to really make sure that public libraries are part of the conversation when we think about creating opportunities for older adults to stay active. And I think that's just so important because there's such a big interest in this in other sectors, and just with a little bit of talking to people in other sectors, it's pretty easy to form partnerships. So, for instance, one of the things that I did when I moved to Greensboro is that I got connected to our area agency on aging. And so this area agency on aging, it serves and supports kind of healthy aging over a 13-county region in North Carolina. And when I talked to them, I found out that they have all of these healthy aging classes that they offer for free throughout the 13-county region. So things like Tai Chi or classes on how to improve your balance that are very immersive. And they had never thought of reaching out to libraries to see, hey, why don't we try doing these classes in libraries? And so I sent some emails and made some connections. And now there's these healthy aging classes that are being offered at no cost to libraries throughout the region. And so I think it's just making it part of the conversation, making sure that people that are interested in supporting fitness are aware that the library is the perfect partner, making sure that those connections are possible and that it is part of the conversation, particularly around healthy aging, since I think that's such an important topic and will only continue to grow in importance in the years to come.
Great points. As you both mentioned, it is very rarely the library by itself. Very commonly, there are partnerships that are involved.
It's never the library by itself, I would say.
True, that's a great point. And hopefully that message resonates loud and clear with our listeners. Libraries can lead the way, but do not have to do it alone. Now, since we're almost finished with this episode of the Princh Library Lounge, if any of our listeners want to continue the conversation with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. So they can, I'll just jump on. So you can reach me. It's just my last name, Lenstra at unthg.edu is probably the best way to reach me. Or you can just follow me on Twitter, just my first and last name at Noah Lenstra. And happy to connect with whomever would like to reach out.
And for me, the best, easiest place to find me is my website, jenncarson.com, JENNCARSON.com. All my contact, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and email and everything's up there, as well as a link to my blog, my books if you're interested in reading those. And then whenever I'm presenting at conferences or traveling around, I usually post it up there too if you want to catch me for those. So yeah, that's probably the best way to find what I'm up to.
Thank you very much, both of you. Again, thank you for sharing your insights. I think that's really awesome to hear both of you who have experience in this area to share it with our listeners. And I hope that this can spread across to libraries all over. So thank you again. And thank you, Noah. Thank you, Jenn, for both coming on the Princh Library Lounge.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Princh Library Lounge. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and spread the word to other library professionals. If you want to learn more about today's episode, check out the Princh Library Lounge website at princh.com/podcast. We will be back next month with the next episode, and until then, happy librarying!